G'day everyone, Dicko here with another kick-ass walkthrough. Tonight, I'm continuing my concepting stage with another drawing. This time, it's for the antagonist of our little story. I haven't got a name for him yet, I'm just going to call him BOSSMAN. Why is he called BOSSMAN? Well, it's because he runs a nightclub in some shit part of town. As you can see, I've listed out my character traits here as well, just like the last drawing. And now I'm basically doing what I did before in the previous video, where I'm just sort of blocking out, warming up, thinking of some poses to go with. And while I do that, I'll talk about what inspired me to create this kind of character. Well, have you ever been to a nightclub and there's this dude who's like in his 40s and clearly not meant to be there, yet has the mindset and temper of a 22-year-old? You know the sort in which you brush against on the dance floor, and then they realize and they look at you and they go, "Oi, you want to start something? You want to start something?" And then their mates go, don't do it, he's not worth it." Then as they pull him away, he looks at you and goes, "If you do it again, I'll fucking glass you." And then you never see them again for the rest of the evening. You know, those sort. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm taking this dude. Except, not only is he a patron of the place, he runs it. And despite his outwardly thick-headed demeanor, he's actually incredibly smart, very cunning, and of course, incredibly intimidating. He's also a bit flamboyant. He will dress very sharply, he will wear a lot of jewelry, and exude an air of absolute confidence. He's not afraid to show off his wealth. Anyway, back to the drawing. As you can see, I've already blocked out a pose that I like, and I'm actually starting off with the underlying musculature rather than going straight into the clothing. The reason being is that I want him to be bulked up, but also have a bit of a dad bod. Like, he will have a bit of a belly on top of all that muscle. I'm pretty happy on the outset. I'm going with that classic strongman sort of body proportions for animation. So big body, big chest, and little legs and fat arms. You know, the kind of guy that just does chest and back day. No leg day, just arms, back, chest. Little chicken legs. Because, chicks only like a big chest, bro. It's tried and true, so let's just run with that. As you can see here as well, I'm working on the face. My first attempt, I'm not too keen on. He looks a bit too young and a little bit too, I don't know. He looks too much like a bodybuilder in this case. Like, something about his face I didn't like. So in order to give him that air of intimidation, I thicken out his jawline and kind of give him a thicker underlying muscular skeleton. I also sharpened up his eyes and give him a more of a serious demeanor as well, and it really helped sort of push through that little barrier that I had in my mind. I'm now blocking out the clothing. As you can see, he's pretty dapper. Like, he's wearing a nice blazer, he's got some nice chinos. He's dressed for the night, basically, and he's dressed to impress. And here you can see how the underlying sort of volume of his body is informing the way the clothes sit on his shoulders and his arms. And I still wanted his belly to sort of protrude out of that, out of the silhouette. So the suit doesn't wrap around his entire body; it kind of sits on the sides. And in classic sort of nightclub fashion, you can't go without a good pair of moccasins. Leather, of course. Tanned with, as you will see in the future, white pants. You may have also noticed that his hair is a combination of dark and grey, because he is an older guy. He's in his 40s, maybe his 50s in this story. I haven't quite picked it out yet, but like, he's an older dude. And here you see I'm just thickening out the exterior line work. I'm keeping it rough still though, because I can't be bothered really cleaning this up super much, because it is still a concept after all. It doesn't need to be like a full-on line worked up inked drawing. It serves its purpose as it is right now. Again, in my mind, I imagine him to be, like, unusually tanned. Like, he spends most of the time indoors, but somehow he still gets a ridiculous tan. And now I'm just experimenting with his cloth color. I went with pink because it just reminds me of the mid 2000s, and I thought that was funny. And again, to match the pink, I went with a dark purple sort of blazer, and then I offset that with some white chinos in the end. I was actually tempted to give him a sort of a leopard print singlet underneath that, underneath the blazer. Pink, of course, still, but I thought that would be interesting. I might still go with that in the future. It depends on how much that conflicts with the actual character in terms of will your eyes just be drawn to that bloody singlet underneath that blazer. That's something I have to explore still. You also may have noticed that, again, that the pose itself is kind of like a slice of life sort of situation. It's something that this character kind of does on the daily, or at least semi-regularly. And again, it's something just to offer a little bit of expression to the character, just to communicate some of the ideas I have in my mind about that character, and how to sort of integrate that into his eventual sculpt. And again, I'm sure that T-poses and all that sort of stuff, those sort of sketches are really useful for more intensive projects that require a lot of people to work on, all that sort of thing. But on a personal project like this, it's more like a waste of time than it is of any benefit, because you mentally are aware of what you're going to make already. It's probably just easier to just move into the sculpting stage with this as a reference as it is. I mean, the only thing you may get out of doing a full-on turnaround with a sketch is just nailing your proportions a little bit faster. But that being said, when you're sculpting, it's a much more fluid experience, and unlike doing traditional modeling techniques, you aren't constraining yourself to those T-poses as much, and ultimately you get a better result if you just end up doing things a bit more naturally, I find, at least. And of course, this is all subjective to how I actually work, so if you find yourself needing to use T-poses for your reference for everything you do, including sculpting, then go ahead. It's all there for you. That's the great thing about doing digital art. I will say, though, that if you are designing things like machinery, like cars or bikes or anything like that, then I would personally definitely use orthographic drawings as reference. I wouldn't go without it. They're just too technical to avoid using them. And finally, I'm rounding off this picture with a little bit of shading. I've got to say, though, I love shading in Krita. I really, really enjoyed it. The layer system is practically the same as Photoshop, apart from a few things like the way they handle adjustment layers and stuff like that. But again, the thing I love about this software is just the way you can blend. Blending just feels so much more natural in this software. You'll see as I start shading in some extra detail around his eyes and around the shirt and stuff that it just comes much more naturally out of the brushes with Krita than it does with the standard blur brush or smudge brush out of Photoshop. I really, really, really like it. It's great. You may also notice that I try to avoid using too many layers when it comes to this sort of concept stuff. I mean, if I was doing environments and stuff like that, it'd probably be way more detailed in terms of how many layers I use. But generally speaking, I kind of go with a base layer, a shadow layer, some highlights, and then maybe a blending layer on top, in between there somewhere, and maybe another layer, a final layer for highlighted, rim lights and stuff like that. But I don't create a new layer for every object of clothing. I don't bother doing that with, the jewelry and stuff like that, because ultimately this animation won't require that level of detail. If it was a super realistic sort of thing, maybe I'd go into detail about the texture of the shirt, the kind of material it uses, all that sort of stuff. But because it's going to be toon shaded, again, there's no point in going into that much sort of scrutiny with how to build out those character materials and stuff like that. It's absolutely just a waste of time, in my opinion. That being said, if you have a very specific look in mind, especially even if it is in a toon shade, for instance, if you want to have a rusted metal, or chip paint or anything like that, then it is worth putting that into the detail of the concept. Basically, only add it if it is necessary for your creative vision. Otherwise, it seems like a waste of time. I mean, if you are exploring styles, if you are exploring the different concepts from toon shade to realism or semi-realism, then it's worth exploring those different sort of concepts and the way you draw them. But if you have a very specific vision in mind, either be it, if you are doing like toon shade, then just don't overwhelm yourself with the details, because ultimately you want to get out of that pre-production stage and get into that production stage, into creating those models, into making them possible. Anyway, we've come to the tail end of this. I hope you like the picture. I hope I've communicated my intentions clearly enough, and I hope you enjoy the picture. And I really like this character. I think he looks pretty cool, and I think he's going to be a lot of fun to model up and animate, especially when you see him in the animation and the story. I think you're going to get a little kick out of it. Anyway, that's enough for now. If you enjoy this, let me know. If you have any other suggestions, let me know. I think my next few videos will delve into some layout and maybe some storyboarding. I think I need to push forward. It's already the end of February, so I need to get my ass out of pre-production as much as possible and start pushing towards getting these models ready, the scenes ready, and yeah, just making sure that things move forward, basically. So if you enjoy these videos, please let me know. I'd love to hear what you have to say, and I want to hear if you have any questions or comments. I'm happy to answer them, and until then, catches.